Today I have the great pleasure of getting a chance to talk to somebody whose work I've been following for a while. His name is Darren E. Cowley, and he is like the mastermind or one of the masterminds behind Isotonik Studios, who I've actually been using their work a lot lately because I've become a little bit obsessed with the Novation Circuit, and they wrote the editor for the synth engine of that. But their work spans an awful long period of time and a lot of different technologies and ideas. And so now I've said my piece, and rather than me yammer on some more, let's talk to Darren a little bit. Hey, Darren, how's it going?
Wonderful. Good to see you.
Hey, thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to have this chat. This is really great.
Not a problem at all. It's when you first suggested it, something I've been looking forward to, and the rest of the team have been quite excited about the opportunity of hearing my voice for a change, rather than me rabbiting on at them through Messenger and the like.
Right. There you go. So why don't we start off by having you explain what you're doing, what you do with Isotonik, as well as sort of like the bigger picture of what your artistry looks like.
Cool. Well, Isotonik really kind of started as just myself. It was born out of really mucking about with originally an X-Zone 1D from Allen and Heath. It did so much, but actually promised more. So I spent days, weeks, months working with the Bones translator software to make page upon page of controls and that kind of thing. I have kind of moved on and then bought a Korg pad control. And I don't know if you remember, it was a little bit of utility software, which I think was called FarmPad way back when, probably 7-8 years ago. And that was kind of my first experience of doing any form of proper coding, if you like. But eventually, Max for Live got released, and I'd never touched Max itself. And coming from writing lines and lines of if statements and global parameters and stuff, having the visual environment was just enlightening for me. And having just received an APC 40, I say received, begged one of the retailers to sell me their demo version, because we just couldn't get them in the UK. I seemed to walk into shops and we're getting a shipment, but it never materialised. So I set about working with Max for Live and the APC 40, and I think it's probably only about 2 or 3 months later, maxforlive.com, the repository of possibly thousands of Max for Live devices now,
right,
that was born, and I whacked up a device called Isotonik, and it was named quite simply. I was sitting there in the evening doing my patching away, and the first device I did was around trying to get some looping kind of behavior going, which was ultimately forgetful. Didn't work particularly well, but I took some inspiration. I was just staring at my old school hardcore rave records, and one of them was called Liquid, and so the first device was called Liquid. The second device, which was Isotonik, took its name from the Everywhere I Go tune by Isotonik, who is seemingly a very nice guy who's ended up being one of my customers some many years later. So that's really where it started.
That's hilarious. So these first Max for Live devices that you did, what kind of stuff did they do? I mean, I have a dim memory, but I think I might have had a few beers between then and now, so it's a little...
I've had a few bottles of red wine as well. So
right.
I think the thing was, because Max for Live was the first in live kind of approved hackable way of doing things. There was the API projects before,
right.
But when Max for Live started, sort of the devices I was seeing were delays and granulator and all sorts of audio effects, and it didn't really make much sense to me, because I'm not a producer, I'm a DJ first and foremost. I like performing, and Ableton appealed to me on the original basis that I could make mixtapes quite simply, dragging into arrange mode and pretending that I could beat match perfectly every single time and mix 10 tracks, which my friends thought was quite amazing until I showed them exactly how I was doing it. So I didn't really want to go down the route of producing another flanger or anything like that. But Max for Live actually allows you to get under the skin of Ableton. And so I wanted to create a kind of one controller mega set kind of thing. And there's a guy called Tom Cosm, who you've probably heard of.
Yep.
Who I'm delighted has now joined the Isotonik collective as part of the circuit artists that are putting out patches. He put together this mega set principle where you just broke your whole tracks into individual clips. So you could put them in tracks and then basically phrase your mixing as you went without any real sort of, I'd call it proper preparation, because you still had that element of grabbing a record out the box. You did have to warp your clips and split them beforehand, but I'd had them all set up in sort of 8 tracks, 5 clips per tune effectively, and I wanted to do a little bit more with them. So with Max for Live, I was able to dig into the control surface itself. And so whilst the APC-40 on one level, the first version of it, was kind of trigger clips, change volumes, and affect the track that's in question and the device that's in question, it didn't really work for me as a DJ. Because if I was on track 1 and I was playing with a bass and filtering it down, I'd want to be doing a similar kind of thing on track 2 as well. So I basically designed the device to enable me to take over the encoders, which still are pretty much some of the best encoders out there with their visual feedback that you can switch between banks and see where you are. I still think there's a gap in the market for someone coming out with I'd say a reasonably priced version of just the encoders type thing.
Encoders, right.
Yeah, that would be really cool. But my idea was simply to get rid of the track control and the device control and actually arrange those encoders vertically. So I would have 4 in a row for 4 tracks, bass, mid, treble and gain. And then I could switch to another bank. I'd have high filter, low filter, resonance and perhaps a flanger and that kind of thing. And it was really digging deeper and deeper into what is still actually undocumented areas of Max for Live to find out how I could disconnect an encoder, take control of it, listen to what it moves, light it up, change the way it lights. It really was a kind of Sudoku puzzle that my wife calls it my homework. It's my hobby. It's the, there's a puzzle. I've got to fix it. I'll finish. I'll put the laptop down. We'll go in the front room, and then 20 minutes later, the idea of how to solve that thing I've been working on for the last 2 days will come to me, and I'll excuse myself, and she knows where I'm going. She's very, very, very considerate on that basis. She knows it would drive me insane if I'm sitting there and it's going around my head.
Yeah, well, especially when you're doing that problem solving, it's like you get that thing where you think, I think this is how it would solve it, and it's like going to eat at you until you find out if it worked or not, right?
And to be fair, Max for Live doesn't help. It really doesn't, because there's like 40 ways of doing the same thing. And I'll find a solution, and I look at some of the stuff I released right at the start, and I look at it now and go, oh my God, that's almost embarrassing. If anyone opened that up and had a look at it with its like 375 send and receives of one simple task. Every day I'm learning, and it's really helped me with the guys on the team digging in and reverse engineering their stuff.
Yeah.
And we run a Facebook group, so it's a private one, and if anyone gets stuck, they throw up a piece of code and people pull it apart, put it back together, and I nick the snippet and then use it in my own stuff. It's quite useful.
That's actually interesting, though, that you talk about it in that way, because, given my position, I get to kind of go all over the world and talk to people at Max, and one of the things I would say is that most people are scared to show me their Max patches.
Really? Okay.
And the reason I think is because there's this assumption that there really probably is just one right way to do things, and I'm going to look stupid if they see what my patch looks like, right? And I'm like, no, that's the cool thing about Macs is there's like 50 ways. Anything you want to do, there's 50 ways to do it, right? And whichever way you choose to do, if you get the job done, that's the winner, right?
Absolutely.
But I think that you actually cracked something that a lot of people don't, which is if you allow yourself to kind of like open your patches and share it or whatever, you'll get hints and you'll constantly be growing and you'll learn stuff at a rate that you never would by just kind of like trying to intellectually figure stuff out.
Absolutely. I mean, I pretty much have patched and probably will always patch on a trial and error basis. Every now and again, the alt click on what does this object actually do, and oh, I see, right, okay. But pulling stuff apart, and I tend to finish a patch. I'll send it to probably Lee Huddleston, who's probably one of my closest partners on the team, and he'll open it up and he'll go, right, okay, well, you can delete about 20 objects in that path by doing this, this, and this. And every now and again, I'll just be staring at something for an hour, and I'll send him a message on Messenger, and it will come back in an answer that's so unbelievably simple. I'm looking for an object that doesn't exist, but the combination of two and wiring the patch cord backwards to the way I thought actually does what I'm looking for. And that's the beauty of it in reality. It does allow you to do what you want.
You said that you're kind of a DJ at heart, but also you talked when you were playing around with doing things with the Korg drum pad, that you were kind of a coder at that point. You came to the visual programming of Macs kind of because of Macs for Live.
Yeah, it really was. Literally, I DJed for many, many years, lugging around record boxes, 6 at a time. Before I had a car, I actually managed to get 6 on a bus at one point to get myself to a gig, which was enjoyable at the other end, watching the bus driver just stare at me, making him late.
Right.
And then as time moved on and it got into CDJs, I got the first Mark Thousands, which are still in a box somewhere in the house. And I was always looking for the next thing. And I must admit, going across the CDs, I kind of lost quite a bit of my love affair for DJing. It became very formulaic. You'd look at the countdown and it was 1 minute 45. Press play, you've got exact time to phrase it in, bring the next one in, mix out. And I'm just looking for something more. And when I packed the CDs away and I'd moved on at that point to Serato and back into vinyl and vinyl control, I was recording my mixes, and I'm sure you'll be appreciative of spending an hour and a half trying to get a mix perfect, and just at the point where you think, right, I'm done.
Right.
You slip. The beat goes out of time and you're like, ah. So it was always a challenge to get that perfect mix and put it on a CD, put it into a promoter's hand and find your big break, which unfortunately never happened, but hey, things happen for a reason. So I think it was Ableton Live 5. And actually, bit of a confession, myself and a friend by the name of Neil, we went halves on buying it and split the unlocks between us. So he had it on his, I had it on mine. And I set about creating perfect mixes in that way. It led me to start playing out with Ableton on that basis with various different MIDI controllers, the pad control, the X-Zone 1D, which became 2 of them. Then it's the APC 40, then there was a launch pad, then there was another launch pad, then there was some encoders, and I'm staring at like 3 of those packing boxes that are just filled with various MIDI controllers. That have buttons and lights and my Wi-Fi shoes. I buy MIDI controllers.
So, what is it about working? I mean, because to a certain extent, you could say that working inside of Ableton is sort of a different version of the thing you didn't like about CDs, which is it has the potential of making everything perfect, right?
It does, but it allows me to focus on other things. And I know the argument of sync or not sync. I've been a DJ for 20 odd years, so I think I know how to be synced now. I don't need to prove it to anybody.
Right.
But if I've got a bass line of one tune mixed in with the drum beat of another, I've got the synths and strings coming over another, and then I'm dropping an a cappella that I've cut up, I can create something new. And yeah, I appreciate if you're playing out to a big crowd, they want to hear tunes in the way that they were made. And I've not made my own things, but I really sort of go back to the age of cold cut and the like, and doing cut ups and stuff like that.
Doing live remixing, basically.
Yeah,
right.
Basically that was it. And the whole appeal of Ableton was to be able to do that, admittedly pre-prepared at the start, but then getting more and more spontaneous as time went on. And Max for Live really made that possible, because I could access the stuff that I couldn't via any MIDI controller, really, to do looping on each track simultaneously, follow actions at clip ends, that kind of thing. Yeah, it kind of opened up Ableton to another level when Max for Live came out.
Sure. So, since you kind of were a coder before you were a Max, were you a coder before you were a DJ, or were you a DJ before you were a coder? I mean, which was first, the art or the technology?
The coder is a very... I basically learned by trial and error writing text code. I don't know C, I don't know anything else. It was very rudimentary, but it's definitely the DJing that came first. That's the first love. That'll be the last love. I've just managed to persuade my wife that the decks are going back into the lounge on the proviso that we get a nice piece of furniture made to house them.
Oh, nice. Good call. Yeah. Good call. But so since the art came first, since DJing came first, what is it that drew you into doing code? What made you say, I'm gonna move away from doing the DJ work and focus on trying to figure out how to be, in essence, a technology? I mean, if you think of what is a coder is just really a technology hacker, right? Yeah. You're using their tools to hack their systems, right? What caused you to make that jump?
I think having DJed for many years and slowly sort of fell out of love of traveling 3 or 4 hours to play a 2-hour set that none of your friends were there, get back in the car, that was your weekend. It slowly dwindled in its appeal. I was fortunate enough to play upstairs at Space in Ibiza for one of Carl Cox's nights and came off the decks. Ambition achieved. I've played to probably 30 people in this bar, and they turned the sound down the minute I stepped on the decks, but it didn't really matter. I'd kind of reached the point where I'm like, I've achieved this. And I found, I thought at the time, with the maxforlive.com patch rising in downloads to the point at one point it was actually the most downloaded patch with something like 10,000 downloads. Wow. I thought I could do something with this.
Right.
And actually a little payment came through on PayPal from a guy called Ten Snake who was using it in his live show, and I quickly Googled him, found him, and he ended up having one of the hits of that summer in a track called Coma Cat. So it gave me a little bit of a boost and belief in myself that this actually could be a decent direction for me.
On your site, you have a really extensive set of tools for people to get their hands on. How much of that stuff is, I mean, you have some stuff that's obviously not Max for Live, or even, I don't know if it's Max based. You have stuff for like Behringers. Is some of this stuff just basically the Python scripts to make them work inside of Ableton?
Yeah, very much so.
All right.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to get hold of one of the K series, the K2 from Allen and Heath. When Andy Rigby Jones was working there, he basically went, "What can you do with this?" And it was quite a pig to work with because there was no Python script for it. So you were kind of trying to translate the MIDI and do stuff with it, and it
We're
wasn't
doing the
great.
mini mapping, which is always a pain in the ass, right?
Yeah, and you're restricted. So, and the thing was, it was like a mini APC 40 to me, and there was a guy out there called Will Marshall who'd made a Python script for it, but it wasn't quite finished, and I just happened to bump into Lee Huddleston through Facebook and various other forums and stuff, and asked him if he'd be willing to have a look at it. He pulled it apart, rewrote it from scratch, and that was our first kind of controller script, if you like.
I see.
That's really the start of that relationship, which has grown and grown and grown. I mean, we've done stuff as simple as just the APC Mini XL, adding session control to it. But then there's other stuff like the Akai MIDI Mix, which is a great, really, really cheap controller, but doesn't do a great deal in Ableton. So we put a really supercharged script behind it. Then the bearing is stuff, which it's a meaty, massive controller. If they could slim that down and make it really cheap and popular, that could be my dream. I've actually, I'm sitting staring at two of them because I bought one and I won one on eBay that I forgot I'd bid on. So that's got to be used in a video before I put it back on eBay, I think.
Yes,
One
of the things that I have noticed, though, and I noticed this first of all because it was recently announced for the Isotonik Circuit editor, Novation, for the editor for Novation, is you've started doing VST and AU ports of your stuff too, right?
Yeah, that's I can't claim any credit for that, bar giving Lee a hard time on it. Effectively, the circuit editor, the original one, was a joint project between ourselves and Novation. They'd created a max patch to originally create the synth presets for it. I think if you put it out on a piece of paper, it would have taken up about 30 screens in size.
Right.
So our job was to pull it down and actually make it work within Ableton, which, as you know, Ableton's restricted to one MIDI channel per track.
Right.
And the circuit works on 3. So if you wanted an editor, we were faced with 3 different tracks, all affecting different things and different floating windows. And it was going to be a challenge. And Lee basically came up with a way of bypassing the MIDI track restriction with his LMH external within there.
Right.
And with that, we developed the circuit editor, which, to be fair, was going to be maybe a couple of weeks' work, but when we sent back our first draft to Novation, they saw what it could be, became more like 3 months' work, which
the dreaded enhancement requests, huh?
That's the one.
Oh man,
yeah. And to be honest, they were really good because the team that was there were coming at it from all different angles. They had a great QA team. So what I would let slip previously, they would challenge back, and it was literally down to that's a pixel too wide, that's got the wrong capitalization. The attention to detail was a massive learning for us.
Sure.
And certainly for me, probably not so much for Lee, as he would say, I don't test thoroughly enough as it is. We wanted to do more, and so we then launched the Circuit Editor Pro, which again was based in Max, has a standalone but a Max for Live variety. And the point of having the Max for Live variety was to get round Ableton's limitation of 128 parameters. So with the Pro Editor, you can, I think there's about 305 parameters from memory. You can automate all of those and actually use the circuit itself as its own sort of standalone synth. So you're not tied to the sequencer, so you can play clicks into it, get the mythical triplets that the unit won't allow you to do with the sequencer. Right. I don't see that's an issue, to be perfectly honest, but every single time, and there's a really active Circuit Owners Facebook group, if you've seen that.
Yeah, I'm a member. Actually that group is what sort of convinced me that I had to I had to cross over the boundary. I had to give it a swing. It's
the most rabid bunch of fans I've seen in some time. and where kind of other synth groups get a bit narky with each other and one man upmanship. There's such a camaraderie in that group, and they're constantly trying to come up with new ideas and new different ways of using the limited synth, and it's pushing the boundaries. And we kind of fell into that, myself and Lee, and wanted to do more and more and more, and to expand it to other people and more users. It was decided to go down the VST and AU route, which will have a standalone version as well, I think on Monday, if everything goes to plan. We're going to continue to develop that, because that probably has the widest base of users. That's realistically where the future of that particular product would traverse into. It also gives us the opportunity for copy protection, which is a challenge with Macs, as you can understand.
Yeah, I can. So the question is, how do you make the transfer? I mean, I think there are a lot of my listeners that would be like, wow, I would love to make that transfer from a Macs-driven development to something that is VST-based or even, true standalone-based. Did you use the Max Patch then just as a sort of like prototype for what the VST and the standalones did, or did you find some bridging technology you could develop? How did you handle that?
I can't talk about the actual VST. That's Lee entirely.
Okay,
He's done that in Juice effectively. But
yeah, sure.
You describing it as a prototype is exactly where both ourselves and Novation came from.
Got it.
We originally had a look at, do we do the knobs so that they look like the circuit? Do we replace the graphics so it's kind of skinned and VST looking? And we actually went, no, let's make it in Max for Live and use Max for Live objects, and with that encourage people to give us feedback. And we set up a feedback form and collated all the feedback. We're sharing that backwards and forwards with Novation. I think it's fair to say that even we didn't know what Novation's full plans for that synth were. We knew they had a team working on the next step, and then when we saw it and then saw the next one, we're up to 1.4. I don't know if there's any further development, but hey, they've taken that so much further than what came in the original box, and I can still get an acid line out of it in 20 seconds.
Right. Yeah, but when I saw the initial box and what was in it, I was like, oh, that's cool, but not very interesting to me. And with each update, it's like, oh, wow, well, they chopped away about half of the things I would have had a problem with. And the next one was half again is better, and it's like, holy cow, this is... So finally, that 1.4 release, it was like, I don't really have any reason to stop, considering. I have to give it a swing, right?
Yeah,
but it was
absolutely
really important to have access to your editor too, which was really cool. Now, one of the other things I know about Isotonik is it's actually kind of a funny thing, but I want to talk to you about it because it's an important issue, I think. Quite a while ago, one of the sound designers whose work I liked to get whenever he came out with something was this guy who went by the moniker Ned Rush, right?
Yeah.
And I really liked his sample work. It was just it just kind of really tickled my ear in the right way, right? And then all of a sudden he announces on Facebook, "Oh, great news! I'm gonna be joining the Isotonik team." And I was like, "These bastards are getting everybody," But how? First of all, what is it that has you decide when someone would be a good fit for your team? But even more importantly, oftentimes when we think about things like sound design or sound tool development or whatever, it tends to, in our mind, be kind of a solitary activity, right? I've got like a crazy idea and I just have to find a way to make it. I mean, it's like art in a way. I just, I'm compelled to make this thing. How do you take that kind of perspective? And I'm projecting, but I'm sure there was a lot of that in Ned, right?
We call him Sharon.
Oh, yeah.
He's got so many different personalities that Sharon seems to be one that fits the best.
That's hilarious. So how do you take diverse personalities and bring them together in a team that's got a direction and a focus?
It's I was finding I would be, and you're so spot on with the solitariness of the sound designer, the coder, the staring at a screen for probably 3 to 4 months to produce anything that you'd share. And I was finding in the modern age, keeping up with social and everything else, I was spending more time doing that than coding. And then when I did release something, it would be in someone's newsfeed for a millisecond before it fell down. And I was like, I'm doing all this work, putting all this effort in, and I think it's really brilliant, and it's over in a flash. And I saw Ned was doing a similar type of stuff, but in a slightly different direction. His was more of the audio plugins and the like.
Right.
I befriended him on Facebook, as with pretty much the entire team, and we gelled, to be fair. And he had similar challenges to me. He couldn't keep up an output. So if we combined what I did with what he did, he'd release something 1 month, I'd release something the month after, and then there'll be a barren month. And that's where the idea came from, of inviting people to join in, to be fair. And it's very much on a collective basis. Each of the guys is on a month's contract, effectively. If you've seen the 24-hour party people, the story of factory records, etc., it's a collective. We all contribute towards it, and we shout up our ideas on the Facebook group. So if someone comes up with an idea first, that's it, it's Bagsy. No one else can do it. But what has happened is people have started to combine and collaborate together. And certainly the stuff that Ned did, because he kind of reached a point with the audio stuff that he'd run out of ideas. So he wanted to do something completely different and came up with the Brainwash Visualizer.
Right.
Did a couple of others. And then we kind of went, wouldn't it be great if you could merge all of these together? He was working at the time with Bob, the guy behind Visible, as his kind of mentor on those visual devices. So brought him along, and we came up with this idea of the World Collection with one viewer and multiple modules. And from then, that's been a massive ride of learning. And we've basically got a guy called Chris Vick, other end of the planet to me. So I speak to him in the morning before I go to work. And we've got Adam Rochard from the Utami guys. He's done some stuff for us as well. And we've just released a new pack from Sem Shimla as well, another guy that's really active in the jitter world. And he's been working with us probably for 4 months or so. Okay. And we host everything on a Git, like most development teams, albeit ones that are spread around the world. We build modules. It's the point now where I, who do nothing with visuals, can pick up the little snippets and modules and patch them together like Lego.
That's cool.
It's great fun, and it's really challenging working with all of these different guys and different experience, different personalities. They're all artists, and that's one of the greatest things of working in a team like this.
So you mentioned those guys, and you've mentioned Lee. Who else is part of the Isotonik team?
Well, we've got the Audio Outlaw, which is Antonio Sage, one of the Ableton certified trainers, I believe out in LA, but he'll tell me off if that's not correct. He's kind of the same mindset as me. He's a great ideas man, a designer, and he works with various programmers to bring his ideas to life. Okay. There's a guy called Ernesto, who's the gentleman behind Strange Lines. He's just taking a break at the moment because he's doing his education and thesis and that kind of stuff, but he's released three or four devices, and he's got a ton of more up his sleeve as well. In the MIDI world, Mark Towers is absolutely smashing it out for us at the moment with his arcade series, which really works around the principle that me, him, most of us as our youth were putting 10p pieces into arcade games, yep. And now we're in music. So to combine the two, Asteroids and Polypin based on pinball, Tetric based on Tetris.
Right.
He's just working on his arcade series Returns. It's not Arcade Series 2, it's Arcade Series Returns, and that's another great pack of generative sequencers for melodies and drums, and all based around roughly an 8x8 grid. So they work with integration with the push, with the launch pads, and now with the Machina Jam, because we've been working with Native Instruments with regards to their scripts in Ableton, and they've been awesome as well. Yeah, it's great working with manufacturers, especially when they listen.
Yeah, well, that was my next question, because in addition to collaboration within your team, you have actually been doing some significant collaborations with manufacturers. Now, do you find that they come to you because you've got experience in the genre, or do you contact them when you see an interesting piece of hardware?
Originally, I contacted Novation with a device called Octopad that gave 8 layers of control to the launch pad. There was a guy there called Simon Holstead, and he said, "Oh, that looks great. Where do you live?" And I live an hour down the road from them. So popped in, we hit it off, and I think a month later they gave me a Twitch, the DJ controller. Yep. Oh, create something in Max for Live for it, and I was just about to, and they did it in house, and I was like, oh, never mind. Simon moved on, and he went to Ableton. And it's a very small industry, as you can imagine.
Right. Yeah, it is.
And his replacement then invited me over to High Wycombe again and showed me the first Launch Control XL. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. Right, we want a sequencer. Oh, okay. Yeah, brilliant. So set about designing that, pulling that together. And that's where the circuit work came from as well. We're actually working with one of the largest synth manufacturers in the world, but I can't say who, and they did just email us and say, hi, we are, and we would like to talk, which was fantastic to get that kind of feedback.
Well, it seems like for a lot of people that Novation editor did kind of put you on the map, because while the stuff for like true believers, I think a lot of us knew your work leading into that. I don't know that anybody expected the circuit to kind of catch a wave like it has.
Yeah, I think you're right.
It's not, it's not the most popular thing, but it's caught a lot more attention I think people expected. And a lot of that is due to Novation sticking with it and continuing to make it better. But a lot of it too was you putting some of this editing functionality into people's hands. That was a pretty big deal, and so that was the first opportunity for you to really get in the face of sort of like the broader music community, I think.
Yeah, I think up until that point, I mean, I'm sending out press releases left, right, and centre. I've been very fortunate to get some features on Create Digital Music and Ask Audio and the like. But when the circuit editor dropped, and there was a feature in Music Tech magazine, actual printed hard copy, and I'm standing in WH Smith and going, oh my, wow, that's amazing. And then Synthtopia and Sound on Sound, and it exploded. It really did. We have roughly sort of 20,000 people on the mailing list, but nearly half of those are because of the circuit editor.
Wow, that's wild. So you talk a little bit about having to be out there, being active, and kind of marketing yourself through social media. One of the things that I'd say is, because of what I do and because of the things I'm interested in, I get to see the broad base of people. And there are some companies that are almost obnoxious with the amount of marketing, right? And there are other companies that market so seldom that when they do put a marketing piece out, I'm like, oh man, I forgot all about them, and then I immediately forget all about them again, right? You seem to have kind of hit the right stride, in that I kind of see your stuff fairly often, and I think some of it is because you're generating stuff relatively you often will have a new thing coming out, right?
Yeah.
So I get a chance to see it, and I recognize it. I recognize the name. Everything's there, but I never feel like pummeled by your marketing.
Thank you.
What is your perspective on doing that in a way that's like respectful of the viewer while still feeling like you're actively getting your message out there?
The day job has nothing to do with music, as you could probably imagine. I work in the car industry, and
Okay.
actually that's kind of a thing I took from there. In an industry that needs to hit a certain volume and units, the temptation is to have a sale every weekend.
Right.
So if you tell a customer that you've got a sale this weekend and they don't come, and then you tell them next weekend you have a sale, you can guess what? You lose your credibility pretty quickly.
Right.
When I started, I was quite often sort of every 2 months slashing the prices, doing a 50% sale, sticking it on Facebook, etc. And it didn't really have the impact I was looking for. And actually, if the products we sell are worth the price that we charge, then they should stick at that price. We do have a Black Friday sale, but we tend to be consistent. And with the marketing, I really kind of threw it out to the team and said, look, each of us is putting a month, 2 months, 3 months or so into a device, into a product. If I release it and then put another one out in 24 hours and another one after it, nothing's got a chance to breathe.
Right.
And like you say, you see something and you remember it for 24 hours, then you forget it. What we find is when we release something new, we'll also see people come back for stuff that they forgot about 2 weeks ago, which is obviously a great benefit to being part of a larger collective. But we try not to send anything out unless we have something to say. That was the simple kind of approach. We will break our news stories into videos and have those staggered over a period of time on social media because of the transient nature of it. But actually the mailing list and people's email, etc., is probably the most valuable commodity that we have, and we respect people not getting stuff every 24 hours. I still stay on mailing lists that I detest, but I do it because I like to see what they do.
Right.
And you learn from every email that comes through.
Sure.
I believe, anyway. We're never going to be taking out adverts in the TV. I don't see us as taking out static adverts in the magazines in any shape or form, but we'll certainly do pay-per-click in the future and that kind of thing.
I know for myself, in having released product over the years, there are some of them that were good sellers that kind of surprised me, and I didn't even care for them as devices, but people liked them, so boom,
Yeah,
great. All of a sudden, I love them too, right?
yeah,
But I had some favorite things, both when I was doing plugins as well as Max for Live devices. I have a couple of favorites. I'm curious, for someone who's had their hands into so many different things, what's your favorite? What's like your kind of proud moment, your proud papa moment?
challenging. There's one from the guys, and that's the multi-clip editor that allows you to select various MIDI clips, whether they're in session or actually across in a range view of Ableton, and edit the MIDI notes. And that's grown and grown to have modulators of it's immense. That one caught me by surprise because the first device from Sebastian was actually around creating light shows on the Launchpad, which I thought was going to be the most amazing device. And it does work brilliantly. It just didn't have the appeal that I thought it would have, whereas the MIDI multi-clip editor, that's blown me away in reality. If it was one of my own devices, then probably Follow, which is part of the modular series, which very simply triggers a follow action to play a different clip, and you choose which one at the end of the current clip. It can also trigger a scene, and that's the bit that I really underestimated the appeal when a guy called Christian Ponsford did a video of it, using it effectively in worship and having it as backing tracks. And I know a number of people that use that in backing tracks on their stage. People like Public Image Limited, I know, use that. there's a fair few others as well that have contacted me over time that have said, thanks for this, it's great. If we have a guy that's not in, we've got his track, it plays. If we get to a point we want to extend, we just hit loop and our backing track continues looping. So yeah, that's the one that's probably had the longest appeal for me. It's one of the first as well.
I have to admit that multi-clip thing, that makes my head hurt. The complexity that must have gone into making that, that's an amazing piece of work. So then, kind of flipping the script, instead of talking about past stuff that you love, can you give us a little insights on what we're likely to see in the near future?
Oh, yes. There's a new version of the Circuit Editor VST that's hopefully going to be out by the time this podcast gets broadcasted anyway, and we'll continue developing that. There is a complete new set of generative sequences from Mark Towers under the Arcade Series banner, including Pac-Man or rather Ghosts. That's the trademark, obviously. The multi-clip editor and MIDI modulators will have a new arpeggiator that works on a completely different basis to other arpeggiators. That's quite exciting. Looking forward to more stuff with controllers. I've got a product called Optomap, which will allow you to have 8 pages of buttons pre-programmed, going back to kind of my controllerist phase, the likes of Matt Moldova, etc., and pressing buttons and making them do 20,000 things at one time to audio. That's going to be great. There's so much more to come from the World Collection with the team that we've got assembled, and that plus the stuff from Lee, Predator, which allows you to remap the auto mapping Blue Hand feature as you want it, name your banks and everything else with various controllers. That's getting an upgrade, and various other scripts. With a team this big, there's always something going on, but I never count it until it's in my hand that it's actually going to be finished.
Right, I hear that. Darren, this was a fascinating conversation. It was really fun to kind of drill into your work and into your head a little bit. I really do appreciate it, man.
Thank you. It's been fantastic.
All right, and with that, I'm going to let you get along with the rest of your day. Thanks a lot, and we'll talk again soon, okay?
Thanks very much. Bye.
Bye. Hey all, thanks again for listening. Thanks to Darren for taking the time to talk. It was a really interesting chat. Really cool stuff that his team is working on. Make sure that you check it out at the Isotonik site. Other than that, I want to thank you again for listening. Thanks for a lot of the feedback we got from the tripod thing that was happening last month. I hope you all enjoyed the Sax for Live video that Ableton put out. If you didn't, I think you already missed the chance to see it. But in any case, thanks a lot for hanging out, and I will catch you next week.